I definitely believe in destiny, and I definitely have seen in my own life how the forces of good will put you where you need to be, even if that's not where you think you're supposed to go. And it actually ties into my work because one of the reasons I think people are so unhappy today, big reason for unhappiness, is people are not walking in their purpose. They may be making a lot of money, might have a beautiful car, big house, beautiful wife, handsome husband, all the material things they may have, and still be empty on the inside. And I've seen this so much in therapy where people come in there, I'm miserable, I'm unhappy, I'm contemplating suicide, I'm hooked on drugs because I have everything you could possibly want and I still feel empty. And I say, you have everything you want, but you don't have everything you need. And what you need right now is to find the purpose for why you are on this earth. You came here for a reason. And your purpose for being on earth was not to become a millionaire, not necessarily to become the lawyer or the doctor or the engineer. Your purpose on earth was to fulfill your divine mission. And until you align yourself with that, you'll never be happy.
Blessings, family. I'm here with Alana, who's a pillar in the community, and the legend Dr. Umar himself. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be with you.
So Alana reached out not too long ago because she's putting on a very powerful event for celebrating Juneteenth, and she's got some great people coming up. Dr. Umar is one of them.
Yes, so the event is Pure Life Fest, happening on June 20th. We're going to be celebrating Juneteenth, and it's on the summer solstice, so we're going to be celebrating both things. And Dr. Umar is our headline speaker, and he will be sharing a lot of knowledge, as he always does.
Yeah, so maybe some of y'all are like me in that we've seen Dr. Umar sharing his thoughts on a lot of things. He's a thought leader, but I don't personally know the backstory of how he came to be who he is. So, Dr. Umar, I would love for you to tell your story from where you were born to how you got to doing the powerful work that you're doing now in 3 minutes and 33 seconds.
Yes, sir. My journey probably began in elementary school. We were living in North Carolina, although I was born in Philadelphia, but we were living in North Carolina. And around the third grade, the same year that I decided I wanted to be a psychologist, I can't quite remember how I came across the field of psychology, but I do know definitively deciding in the third grade that I wanted to be a psychologist. But that same year, I'll never forget it, I was visited by what I believe could have been an extraterrestrial, could have been an ancestor. I don't know what it was, but it was a body of light that came into my bedroom in Jacksonville, North Carolina. It was about 2 or 3 foot tall, shaped like a man, a well-built man, but it was pure light. You could only see by the outline that it must have been a masculine figure. And it came up to me and it punched me very, very hard in my face. I thought my nose would have been broken. So after the thing ran out the room, I ran into my parents' room and told them what just had happened. They thought I was dreaming, but I wasn't asleep. I was wide awake during the entire affair. And also that same day, I believe it was, my mother and I had seen an unidentified flying object in the sky right outside of my bedroom. And so I think possibly whatever that thing was that came into my room and punched me in the face may have gotten off of that flying object. And if I didn't see this myself, I would have never believed it. So that was the beginning for me, psychology. So when I get back to Philadelphia after my parents' divorce, the elementary school that I attend, they gave us Black history. So 4th and 5th grade, we had Black history class in my elementary school. And that was the introduction to both Black consciousness and public speaking for me. And a few blocks away from that elementary school was the international headquarters of the Honorable Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, which I would later on join after I graduated from college many years later. The irony, though, is my mother had purchased my tennis shoes from a Jewish-owned sneaker shop that was right next door to the Garvey building since the 4th grade. So since I entered that class, the Black history class, My footwear was purchased right next door to the Garvey building, and I never knew that was the Garvey building until I graduated from high school. 5, as Minister of Education for the Garvey movement, I go to Africa for the first time, 30 days, 30 nights. Ethiopia, South Africa, Nigeria, and Senegal. The final stop was Senegal. I go to the Gori Island slave dungeon in Senegal. My first trip to Africa, my first trip to a slave dungeon. I pour libation on the ground inside the female slave dungeon for the first time. And when I get back to my hotel room that night, I had some kind of a spiritual experience. The room started spinning. I start hearing screams, chains, animals, beatings. I'm wide awake. The sun hasn't even set yet. And then that night, it became even more intense. Something started tapping me on my third eye really, really hard. Not enough to hurt me, but hard enough for me to realize that this was not a dream. And so then when I tried to lay down and go to sleep, 2 hands would push me to the other side of the bed. This lasted the entire night until about 4 o'clock when I said, I believe you are my ancestors, but you're scaring me, and I need y'all to let me go to sleep right now. And I would say within an hour, everything stopped. I was able to go to sleep. I woke up the next day, walked into the village because we were staying in a rural section of Peking, Senegal, and my body was shaking. I was tremoring. I was trying to get answers to what had happened to me last night. And that put me on a spiritual journey to dig into African culture. So when I get back to America, 5 years later, September 18th, 2010, I do a public access TV interview in Chicago. 6 weeks after that, I do a public lecture in Harlem, New York, and I take copies of the Chicago interview to Harlem, New York. And within 48 hours, my phone started ringing, and it hasn't stopped in 14 years. Now, the one thing I left out that is important, between going to Africa in 2005 for the first time and blowing up in 2010 with the Chicago interview and the Harlem lecture, on November the 19th of 2011, 6 years after the trip to Africa, I visit the Oyotunji African village by accident in Sheldon, South Carolina. I was invited to speak in Beaufort, South Carolina. The brother who picked me up, the host, he said, have you ever been to Oyotunji? I said, I never even heard of it. He takes me there. I had no idea what this was about. So we get to Oyotunji. We meet Chief Olaitan, who's now an ancestor. And I tell her what happened to me in Gori Island at the slave dungeon 6 years ago. He gives me a divination. And that's when he confirms that it was the ancestors, but it wasn't nothing negative. They were actually celebrating your arrival. And you going to Africa had nothing to do with Marcus Garvey or the movement. That entire thing was orchestrated by your ancestors. And that's when he gave me a divination, gave me a spiritual reading. And also I was given my name Ifatunde Oguntade. So those are probably the highlights of both my political and my spiritual journey. And I think nothing is by accident. I'm born to do exactly what I do.
That is amazing. I was not expecting that at all. I've had extraterrestrial experience as well, but I wasn't expecting you to go there. It's really interesting that in 3rd grade, you wanted to be a psychologist. I don't think I've ever heard any 3rd grader say, I want to be a psychologist. You must have been a very unique child.
Maybe. I was a class clown, though. I like to have fun and crack jokes, but I was always inclined to political consciousness. And I didn't grow up in a politically conscious family. I grew up with 2 great parents, but political consciousness wasn't something that was talked about in the home. So there was never any discussions per se on Marcus Garvey or the Black Panther Party or SNCC Accord, the Civil Rights Movement. My father he raised us as Sunni Orthodox Muslim. And then we transitioned into Shia Islam during my high school years. So it was a pretty strict Islamic foundation that I received. And my mother, her family, they're Christian Baptists. And so I had the Islamic foundation as well as the Christian foundation. My maternal grandmother, God bless her soul, she passed away about 6 years ago. She was Jehovah's Witness. And then on my paternal side, I had an aunt who I stayed with briefly during the 3rd grade. Her husband was one of the local leaders in Philadelphia of the Gods and Earths, the 5% Nation. So I say all that to say that I was blessed to have been exposed to different spiritual orientations early on in life, because I know a lot of times we have been taught and trained in the West to believe that one path is better than the other. And the one thing that I was able to learn, having been exposed to so many different paths, the paths are not necessarily better than the other. What's better than the other is how well we adhere to the path that we choose. There's many roads to the divine. You just have to choose the one that's best suited for you. And it was interesting because I was practicing Islam when I went to Africa, the first visit in '05. But after that experience that night, after the slave dungeon, I wouldn't go back. I knew that it was something much deeper for me, a much deeper calling. And then I met a priest of an Akan priest, while visiting Ghana many years after that trip. And he was also Muslim, and he shared some of his evolution from Islam to African spiritual traditionalism. And so that really helped, provide a lot of insight for me when I made my evolution as well.
Well, that's such a powerful story. Do you have a specific identification, like moniker of what your spiritual relationship is now?
My foundation is Epah, which is the spiritual system of the Yoruba peoples of Nigeria. And that has been my foundation since that first trip to the Oyotunji African village, November 19th of 2011. That's where I've been these past 13 years. In fact, I just came from Oyotunji, visiting for the first time in about 7 years. They just had an ancestor celebration last weekend. So I was there for day 3 of that. And it was a good time because I hadn't been in 7 years, and I hadn't been since Chief Lifetime had transitioned. He's the one who gave me my hand of Epah. He's the one who initiated me into the Ancestor Society. And he was really pivotal with regard to my introduction into the culture. So it was good linking back with the Oyotunji family. But although Epah is my foundation and I'm very serious in my practice of it, I, quote unquote, I flirt with everything. I'm a big fan of the Bhagavad Gita. It's a book that I read on a regular basis. I still read chapters from the Holy Quran. I still read chapters from the Holy Bible. There's certain chapters of the Dhammapada, the Buddhist scripture, that I read. I deal with Akan. I will read some of the Haitian voodoo material that I find if it speaks to my spirit. I am not a fundamentalist in any way. I believe that there's truth in every system and that no system has all of the truth.
Yeah, I love that. I feel that in my studies, Christ, the figure of Christ is like a Wi-Fi signal that casts out a frequency, and that frequency is channeled through multiple beings in multiple cultures. And the message that people bring, whether it's Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad, are specific to the time that they're incarnated in that culture. So they're speaking to the issues of that time, and they're serving those people. And ultimately what ends up happening is there's a lot of distortion about what their message is and what they were actually trying to communicate. And then people now will rely on the distorted expressions of the teachings as opposed to connecting in the present moment with that being's energy, which I think you can always do, because consciousness is not limited to while we're having this physical human experience. These avatars that you mentioned from these different traditions are still here helping. They're just not in a body anymore. So we don't have to give out our power to any externalized source. We can just go directly within and have that communion, and then act based on our own knowing and experience, because you have your own knowing and experience based on your life journey that no one can ever take from you, right? And I feel like people now have the opportunity to rely on that more so than a text that was written thousands of years ago by other human beings.
I agree with that. And to your point, intentionally or unintentionally, I believe that organized religion has served as a diversion away from spiritual development by having people over rely and focus on the rules and the rituals to the exclusion of one's personal spiritual development. And so within religion, more of a focus on adhering to the tradition, adhering to the beliefs, adhering to the practices, but not enough focus on adhering to your own personal spiritual development. Religion is like when you get a recipe out of a cookbook. If you follow it, you might end up being okay. But that recipe is just a general guide. You might want to modify it somewhat so it fits your taste and fits your own unique needs. And I think people are often intimidated away from innovating that particular religious platform so that it benefits their unique experience. They're intimidated away from that by constantly being reminded that God is a great punisher. And I think that although discipline and responsibility and karma and retributive justice are very important, I think religion has overdid the narrative of God as a punisher as opposed to the narrative of God as a developer of souls. And as a result of that, I think the energy of fear plays a much larger place in religion than it should. And it is that fear that keeps a lot of people from digging deeper, even when a spirit is knocking on their third eye to walk in another direction.
I agree with that 100%. I don't feel like fear has any place in religion. I feel like it's the opposite of love.
Yeah.
I feel like the appropriate thing to develop is awareness, but God is not interested in punishing us any more than we would be interested in punishing our child for sticking their finger in a socket, right? It doesn't know any better. It may be ignorant and not know the consequences of its behavior, but that's not something to punish. That's something to teach. And I appreciate that you can take from all these traditions and develop something that speaks to you. And that makes the most sense. If you think about combining vibrations in a creative sense, that's when the most interesting things happen. Like a musician who just does this style of music that's cool, right? But when they start to take in influences and combine things, that's when the inspiration, the innovation really happens. And I think that's the same concept is appropriate when thinking about spirituality, right? Because different times require different combinations of energies. So I'm curious, Alana, what was it? Did you know any of this stuff about Dr. Umar and what inspired you to have him speak at your event?
Not really. I wanted you to speak at my event because I first saw you at the new Black Wall Street in Atlanta. And I was like, wow, they really love you in Atlanta. And just the way that you speak and the amount of knowledge that you carry is so powerful. And I can't imagine who else I would have speak for a Juneteenth event in Atlanta. So I felt like you were the best fit, and I'm just so glad and excited that this worked.
Likewise. I'm humbled by that. Thank you, sister.
I'm curious, just for someone who is so active in the community and doing so much, how does that allow space for you to have a personal life and just enjoy yourself doing things, right? Because we watch these movies about the Marvel characters, the Avengers, right? Doctor Strange doing his thing, but he's always working on saving the world. He's not just, okay, I'm gonna go catch this movie right quick, but he's always in it. And I wonder, in your personal experience, are you able to find balance where you can just enjoy and maybe kick back? And what does that look like for you to just be a human being?
Believe it or not, and a lot of people would find this shocking, but I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert. On the stage, I'm completely the extrovert. At the events, I'm completely the extrovert. But when I'm not serving the people or serving the community, I'm very much a recluse. I can stay in the house. I don't have to go outside. I'm type of guy who goes sit in the woods and just be and not think of anything. I remember when we used to go on the spring break trips in college when I was president of the Black Student Union, and everybody would be walking the strip or going to the club or getting something to drink, and I'm still sitting on the beach. And I remember one of my classmates came up to me. They said, "You came all the way to Florida on spring break to sit at the beach? You've been sitting at the beach every day." But to me, that was heaven. To me, that was peace. I don't require a lot to enjoy myself. But to your point, it seems like natural breaks come in the work. Like I've noticed, without me even trying to make time, most of the time there will be a natural 2-week break. There'll be a natural 30-day break. And I'll be like, wow, I don't have nothing for the next 2 weeks. And then that's the time that I spend to try to go back within myself. Because when you do this work, as you're actually pouring your soul out into people. And a lot of folks don't understand that. So when you get back to the hotel room after the event, sometimes you can feel really drained because that's how spiritually thirsty the audience was. So you got to have that time to reflect, refresh, and renew. I couldn't function without it. I read that Malcolm X, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, they say he could function on 4 hours of sleep per night. I can't do that. I require more regularity. I need 12, at least 8. So I'm not one of those people who could keep on going until they pass out. I have to get my sleep. I have to get my food. I have to get my meditation time and my prayer time. And so I try to keep that balance of being amongst the people and then also being by myself. And sometimes I'll get in trouble with the community because they'll say, I've been texting you, I've been calling you, but they don't understand. When I go within, I'm not talking to nobody. I'm not taking no texts, no emails, and it'll be like 2 weeks. And I'll be like, where is he? I'm taking care of myself at this time because I think sometimes when people do see you as the superhero, like you said, they forget that you're still a human. You may have a divine assignment, but you're still a human. And if you don't take care of yourself, you'll burn out your human vehicle and then the soul have to go back to it where it comes from. And when I look at a lot of my heroes, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, the great Booker T. Washington, when I look at Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, when I look at the great psychologist, Dr. Amos Wilson, most of them checked out early. Most of them checked out in their 50s because I don't think they achieved that balance. And I don't want to repeat that. I want to be here as long as is necessary for me to fulfill my mission.
To hear you say that, I feel like so many of our leaders do leave early, and especially Black men, I feel like leave early. And a lot of it is due to unconsciousness about how to maintain the human vehicle, right? Even some of our rappers and celebrities and all that stuff are dying from heart disease or some sort of preventable condition that basically is about ignorance of the human body and being in right attunement. So I think it's very powerful that you're tuned into yourself like that, and also know that your specific vehicle and assignment requires something unique of you. So you can be inspired by other people, but you can't follow someone else's blueprint because you're not them, right? You have
Correct.
a specific thing to offer. So that's
Correct.
really powerful. What about you? What inspired you to start Pure Life Fest? And tell me a little bit about your story.
Okay, so I've always felt a call to unite people around a common cause. I was coming out of college and I studied things like sociology, anthropology, world religions, philosophy, and all these things. And when you just know that there's more in the world and the world could be a better place and there's some things that's wrong, and I was coming out of college asking myself, how am I going to play a role? How am I going to play the part of the change I want to see happen in the world? And I started my nonprofit, New Earth Inc., back in 2017. And from there, I started organizing events, and I've been on this path since then.
Yeah, what have been some of the challenges to doing this work for you?
Finding the right people and the right people finding me. Because as all change, it's a process. You have to go through it. You have to go through the transformation until it gets to a point of where people understand, like, oh, this is what you're doing. This is what you're about. Now I get it. So.
Yeah, I think it's about honoring alignment and just cultivating your frequency, like Dr. Umar was talking about, because you just hit me up a few days ago and presented this opportunity. And Dr. Umar is somebody I would love to have on my podcast, but like I didn't have to create that opportunity. It was just presented to me because I'm in alignment and because there is something much higher than all of us orchestrating all of these things. And when I really relax into that, then I don't feel the need to burn myself out. I don't feel the need to overextend myself because it's not all about me and what I can offer. Of course, I have a role to play. We all have a role to play, and that's what we're here to do, is to express love through the uniqueness of our vehicle. But we don't have to be martyrs.
Yes.
You know? We're here to live for our truth, not necessarily die for it. Again, I'm not afraid to die for things, but I'm interested in living for things. And for me, the other day, I was making a song, and being an artist and a musician is one of the many things that I do, and it's something I've always been interested in. And I channeled this experience in the booth, and I was listening to it afterwards, and I was like, this is one of the most powerful things I've ever created. And it was also
Wow.
the most fun I've had creating. And I was channeling because I was making sounds that I've never made in my life, like singing. And I was listening to it. I probably listened to the song 100 times. It just came out today. And when I think about the people that inspired me, like Bob Marley or Lauryn Hill or like Tupac, whatever, Kanye, putting a frequency that people can access to reprogram their consciousness, is, to me, the most powerful legacy that you could leave. And it's the musicality of things. Any great orator has a certain musicality to their delivery. I Have a Dream has a rhythm, right? And if we put that to a beat, I bet people would listen to it more than they do,
Yes.
right? So even for myself and for anyone who feels like they're a healer or they have something that they want to share, your gift also is the thing that lights you up the most, right? It doesn't have to be something you don't enjoy. It should be something you enjoy. And for Dr. Umar, he knew in 3rd grade what he wanted to do, right? And he just pursued that. So if you're still looking to figure out your purpose, follow your joy, right? Let it unfold. What about you, Dr. Umar? What lights you
You
up?
know, that's powerful. You say that, how life and experience and ancestors, how they redirect you back to where you're supposed to be. Because when I look at my public speaking, before the 2010 experience with Chicago and New York, that really put me out there to the world, but it all started when I was in the Garvey movement, and I was the youngest member at the time in Philadelphia. And the elders would always ask me to stand up and talk about what being a school psychologist was all about. And it was largely because there wasn't anything else left to talk about for the meeting. So to fill time, they would make the young guy get up there and talk about school psychology and special ed and ADHD and autism and all of this. And so I'm just doing this as an obligation to the organization that I belong to. And then all of a sudden, people started inviting me to come and speak. So at the time, I'm not aware of my oratorical skill, even though it began back in elementary school. It wasn't something that I thought was that fascinating to others. So I started getting invited to Black History Month. Can you come speak to my class? Can you speak to my college? Can you come here? And without that, I never get the invitation to the Chicago interview. And I never get the invitation to Harlem. And so the big explosion for me never takes place. And so it's just interesting how the universe set it up for me to eventually become the public speaker that I am, because I always thought, although I was always a Pan-Africanist, I thought I would just be a psychologist, evaluating, testing, therapy, treating. I thought that was it. I would still be doing my community work, but I never saw it on the global scale. And when I look at where I ended up, I really had little to do with it. The steps were just ordered there. And because I'm like, wait a minute, if we don't live in that neighborhood, I don't go to that school. I don't go to that school. My mother doesn't buy my sneakers from that sneaker store. I never found out that's the Garvey movement. And I'm just like, how all the dots lined up. And I remember when my father took me to my first family reunion while I was in that elementary school, by the way, and we're in Baltimore, Maryland, and we're walking in the back of this church. I believe that was the 6th grade. So Black history class was 4th and 5th. And then 6th grade, I went to my first family reunion, and I'm seeing all this Frederick Douglass paraphernalia in the back of the church. And of course, I learned about Frederick Douglass in Black history class. And I asked my father, I said, why is Frederick Douglass' Bible here? His hat, his shoes, his clothes. And he said, because you're related to him. And I said, what? He said, yeah, we're related to Frederick Douglass. So I found out in elementary school that Frederick Douglass actually grew up with my 4 times great grandfather, Stephen Henry Bailey. They were cousins on Tuckahoo Creek. And I'm related to him through his first cousin, my 4 times great grandfather. And that really gave me an even greater sense of purpose, because I'm like, wow. And it's just amazing how the universe conspires to put you exactly where you're supposed to be if you listen at the right time. And then at that trip to Africa and that slave dungeon and that whole thing, if I didn't go through that, there's no way I look for anything outside of the masjid. You can forget it. Being raised strict Muslim, if I don't go through that, there's no way I ever even consider studying anything outside of the Quran. But I'm telling you, I definitely believe in destiny, and I definitely have seen in my own life how the forces of good will put you where you need to be, even if that's not where you think you're supposed to go. And it actually ties into my work, because one of the reasons I think people are so unhappy today, big reason for unhappiness, is people are not walking in their purpose. They may be making a lot of money, might have a beautiful car, big house, beautiful wife, handsome husband, all the material things they may have, and still be empty on the inside. And I've seen this so much in therapy, where people come in there, I'm miserable, I'm unhappy, I'm contemplating suicide, I'm hooked on drugs because I have everything you could possibly want and I still feel empty. And I say, you have everything you want, but you don't have everything you need. And what you need right now is to find the purpose for why you are on this earth. You came here for a reason. And your purpose for being on earth was not to become a millionaire, not necessarily to become the lawyer or the doctor or the engineer. Your purpose on earth was to fulfill your divine mission. And until you align yourself with that, you'll never be happy. And I think capitalism has done a good job convincing people that what you need to be happy are all things outside of yourself. It's the hypnosis of capitalism, as I call it. To be happy, you got to have this car. When you look at all the commercials, they're not really selling you the car. They're selling you the happiness you're going to get once you buy the car. They're not selling you the home. They're selling you the happiness you're supposed to get after you buy the home. So you buy the car, you're happy for a little bit, so you think that's really pleasure, but it's not peace. You buy the house, you feel happy for a little bit, but that's pleasure, that's not peace. And within a couple months, you're right back where you started. And that's why you see people trying to buy themselves into a better life, buy themselves into happiness, because they've been conditioned by capitalism to think that money and materialism equals happiness. Nothing could be further from the truth. You got to live your purpose. Money has nothing to do with it.
Hookah is the possibility and opportunity that you have living over here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It even takes me to Dr. King or Malcolm or Medgar or any of the martyred great leaders. And people say they knew that they were going to die, or they knew people were trying to kill them, and they kept doing the work anyway. I said, because if that's your purpose, then it doesn't matter what the outcome is. One of the lessons of the Gita that I love so much, which is why I tend to read it a lot, I probably read it about 20 times. But one of the messages in the Gita is when Krishna tells Arjuna, just do the work and don't care about how it turns out. See, we're so concerned about the outcome, but we don't control that. All you control is what you do here and what you do now. And I think the reason why we have so much depression and anxiety in people is we are concerned about the outcome of our actions over which we have no control. The best peace is to not worry about how it all turns out. It's not always easy to relinquish control, but the reality is you don't have control anyway. So just do your best where you are with what you have, and life will be better for you.
I feel like the only thing you have control over is your perspective on what's actually happening in your reality. And if you choose to see it as part of the divine plan and the divine unfolding, and then everything is happening to the highest timeline of that, then even when things don't go the exact way you may have envisioned them, you say, okay, I'm curious about how this shift is now going to take me to an even higher timeline. And
Yes,
it's the
yes.
of having the drive and the purpose with the listening and the flexibility. And the way I think about it that helps me is that the intuitive guidance that we're all getting is like music, right? And then there's in a dance, there's a lead, which is like the masculine part, which provides the structure. And then there's also the feminine counterpart that is being led by the masculine. If the masculine is doing its job properly, then it's leading, but in alignment with the music. And the structure the masculine is providing is based on the music. Because if you're doing salsa with salsa, it's good. But if it's a different type of music and you're trying to do salsa, you're not actually in tune, right? And you have to have that balance of providing the structure, because there are certain rules to certain dances, but you can't be rigid so that the feminine energy can't flow.
Mm,
Like an externalized expression, but we have to have that within our own being to say, okay,
mm,
when is it time for me to listen to the divine and receive this guidance? And when is it time to take aligned action and move powerfully in the world, but also be flexible enough to where if things don't go exactly how I envision them, that I'm not now just like forcing my way onto something, and I'm still able to move in alignment to create the most harmony and progress.
well said. I agree with that.
So what else is going to be going on at the festival in addition to Dr. Umar?
So we're gonna have Dr. Umar speaking, and we're gonna have a few performances by Lava, Tone Levels, Ebony Davis. She will be doing spoken word, and just so many powerful people in the building at one time, and it's gonna be amazing and magical, and I'm really excited.
I'm excited too. That sounds
Looking
amazing.
forward to it. I'm not sure if I've ever spoken on the summer solstice before. I was thinking about that. I said, did I ever speak on the summer solstice? Because I'm a Leo, August 21st, a later side of the Leo. And yeah, and so I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to definitely that experience, to be speaking on that day itself. A very powerful day. Yes.
It's gonna be like a party, but we're gonna put you and the knowledge mixed into that party, and I think that's one of the best ways to receive knowledge.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Dr. Umar, I'm curious, have you ever explored making music or rapping?
I've never explored making music. I didn't have much rhythm as a child, so I never explored dancing. And I was never great at athletics, so that's why I never ended up pursuing sports. I was always the reader, the intellect, the analyzer, like the natural psychologist type of a guy, very brainy. I was always the brainy type person, the spiritually inclined type person. Like, why are things the way they are? I never got into music, but it's interesting you say that, right? Because I remember one time I had gotten a divination, and a woman who did it told me I had musical talent. I think she said it was a musical talent. I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, I have no musical talent, but it might be for an instrument. I'm definitely not a singer, but maybe there's an instrument talent there that I might need to tap into that I haven't really experienced yet.
You definitely have a lot of musical talent, and the voice is the ultimate instrument. I've been listening to you talk this whole time, and you didn't say any filler words. You have amazing breath control, like when you're talking. Like you have a natural breathing pattern that doesn't interrupt the flow of what you're saying, but you're getting the prana to be able to deliver these powerful messages. And that's
Yes.
basically rapping. That's what
Powerful analysis. Powerful analysis.
I don't know how long you're going to be in town when you come for the Juneteenth, but
Mhm.
I would love to take you to one of my homies' studios and we get in the booth
Ah,
and
ah,
get you up some wax.
we might try to work that in.
I'm so grateful that you took the time out today to share some of your story. And I'm glad to hear that it had galactic roots, influences. And that's another thing I wanted to ask before we get off here is I feel as a society, we are awakening to the idea that we're on the earth, but that's part of a larger community and a larger system. And is that something that you share very often? And how do you help people to awaken to their galactic consciousness?
One of the things that tend to lead people to me, obviously, is this search for a therapist. People that reach out, I need somebody to talk to. And so sometimes I might become that first line. And one of the things I like to impart to people is the need to recognize that your emotional problem or your psychological problem may have a spiritual cause or a spiritual aspect to it. That this is not all about the fact that you lost your job. It's not all about the fact you're going through a divorce. It's not all about the fact that someone you love took their own life. We exist in two dimensions. You're here, but you're also somewhere else. And it needs to be alignment between both of those dimensions in order for you to live at peace on this plane. And if you're not at peace, things are not in order. And some of those things are spiritual. And no matter what you do on the physical side, if you don't tend to that spiritual side, you may never get any relief out of this. And so I'm often directing people, especially to traditional African practices. But again, I tell them to find whatever path that you need that feels good to you and feels natural to you. Find that and investigate your challenges through the lens of these different traditional frameworks and see if you can get some sort of relief through that. And the good thing is, I think a lot more people now, because of the time we're living in, I think they're starting not to necessarily divest from their religious orientation, but to examine other orientations alongside the one that they practice so they can get a more fuller experience of spirituality on this earth plane. I think a lot of people are suffering from spiritual famine. Even in the religious houses, they're suffering from a spiritual famine. Yeah, I'm saved. Yeah, I'm baptized. Yeah, I took my shahada. I do my 5 prayers. I go to communal and all of that, but I'm still a little empty here. And I think that emptiness is forcing a lot of people to step outside of the traditional religious practices that they've been raised on. And I've never met a person who went outside who came back and said, I should have never done that. So I definitely think we're living in a time right now where universal energy and divine design is forcing people to tap into true spirituality and not the superficial, commercialized, prepackaged religions that many of us were been raised on. And then when you look at Pluto, I believe Pluto right now is in the sign of what planet goes with Saturn? Uranus. What is the sign that goes with Uranus? The rebel, Aquarius. Pluto, I believe right now is visiting Aquarius. Pluto being a planet of destroy and rebuild, death and rebirth, visiting Aquarius, which is a revolutionary sign. You put them two together, the planet of death and rebirth and a planet of revolution and revolt. I believe we're living in a time where everything we took for granted as being true is going to be questioned at this time, because that's what Aquarius is, the questioner. Pluto, the destroyer. So you're looking at a situation where we're going to be questioning all of the structures, religious and otherwise, that we have taken for granted our whole life to be right and exact. And people are going to start tearing them down, not necessarily physically, but philosophically, so we can give birth to a new earth, which is the name of your organism. Wow. It just hit me. Yes.
I love your breakdown of that. People say that we are in the age of Aquarius.
I believe it.
Man, that was so powerful. Way to tie it all together. When they say that the age of Pisces, which it just came out of, is the age of believing, which is associated with religion, and the age of Aquarius is the knowing. I know, because you've had direct experience. No one can take that from you. And I
Yes,
feel
yes, yes.
for us to all move into that knowing and let go of the belief in God to the knowing relationship with God.
Powerful.
Where it's been to connect with you and just have all this wisdom that you're dropping and learn about the things that y'all are co-creating. I'm very excited to experience it. And I'm excited to begin this relationship. I'm sure we have much more to connect and build on. So thank you for your time and your energy.
Thank you.
Work.
Likewise. Looking forward to seeing you guys. We only got a few days left.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, we're going to put links to the festival where you can buy tickets. And Dr. Umar, is there anything that you want us to link below? Got any podcast books or anything you want us to put in there?
Nah, I think we okay.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having us, and we'll see you on the 20th.
Will do. God bless. Be safe, family. All right now.